Hello and welcome to CyNam 22.2. Welcome CyNam, yay! I'm Reid Darby, one of the directors at CyNam. I also work in the Golden Valley Development Project here in Cheltenham. Natalie.
Hello everyone, I'm Dr. Natalie Cole. I'm a cyber engineer based here in Cheltenham. I'm also the chapter lead for the Ladies of Cheltenham Hacking Society. We're a non-profit organisation supporting the technical progression of women in the cybersecurity industry or those looking to join the industry. We hope you enjoyed the pre-event networking in the arcade this evening. It's great to see so many of you here, and we're also looking forward to meeting more of you at the after-show mixer as well. Back to you, Reid.
We are thrilled to bring you our summer 2022 headline event, CyNam 22.2. This event is in collaboration with the amazing Cheltenham Science Festival. Big up to the Science Festival, folks. Woo! And we're coming to you from the Helix Auditorium. So for the next hour and a half, we will be exploring the world of Web3. All the technologies, crypto, blockchains, NFTs. For those of you that don't know, you're going to learn quite a bit today. But also, we're going to be really looking at some of the impacts today and in the future. So it's going to be a really great evening. Before we start, though, we have a few thank yous. So firstly, a huge shout out to QA, our headline sponsor. Give them a round of applause. Thank you, QA, for sponsoring us. We would not be able to run these events without the help of our sponsors, so we do absolutely appreciate that. Thank you so much. QA help loads of the world's leading tech companies to build their tech and their digital capabilities through a load of training, reskilling boot camps, work-based learning platforms, and apprenticeships. So they do such a great job, and we're thrilled that you could be part of the event. Another huge thank you to InfoSec people for sponsoring our pre-event hospitality. That was really nice. It was so good. It's always good to mix together, particularly as we come out of COVID. And for those of you that don't know, InfoSec people are a specialist cyber and tech recruitment consultancy, and they're built by genuine experts. They work with businesses in the cyber tech arena, from startups, scale-ups, FTSE 100, and central government. Thanks so much, InfoSec people, for being part of this event. And a huge thanks to our friends over at Plexel. Where's Plexel tonight? We've got Plexel, let's give them a shout out. Plexel are going to be doing the after show mixer. Thank you for sponsoring that. It's been so good working with Plexel, such an amazing innovation company here in Cheltenham with the NCSC for Startups program and elsewhere in the UK. And more about their work later in the show. Natalie.
And now for tonight's agenda. Excuse me. We'll be kicking off with our opening keynote from George Coxon and Colin LeMahieu from the Nano Foundation, who will be asking, can Web3, cryptocurrency and blockchain really be the change? We'll then have a myth-busting session with a panel of experts from across the ecosystem, demystifying Web3, blockchain and cryptocurrency, including impacts on the environment, technology and diversity and inclusion. Finally, we'll be finishing with some community updates so you can keep up to date with what's happening in the Cheltenham cyber community this summer. Back to you, Reid.
Thank you, Cheltenham Festivals. This event is brought to you in collaboration with them. It is an honour, as I've said, to be part of their events here in this prestigious science festival. Apparently, this is one of the top 3 science festivals in the country. I didn't know that. But we hope that you get a chance to enjoy the rest of the festival. Please do go over to the arcade when it's open. There are also lots of amazing speakers and events. And if you've got ideas for CyNam for the coming year with the festivals, please let us know.
And a huge thank you to our speakers. The CyNam events wouldn't be possible without the help and generosity of our speakers and community. So thank you all for your ongoing support.
And thank you, our community. It is great to see how popular CyNam is becoming. It's not really about us, it's all about you. Thank you so much for coming, being part of the community. I think this is definitely one of our best yet. And it's not just because of our speakers, but they are amazing.
If you'd like to keep up to date with what CyNam are up to, don't forget to follow them on social media. The details are on the screen and we'll be sharing them later as well. And I'm also going to do a sneaky plug that the Ladies of Cheltenham Hacking Society will be holding our first live event on Thursday, the 14th of July. You can find a link to this event on the Ladies Hacking Society website, which is llhs.com/LCHS, or you can follow us on Twitter at @LHS_Chel. Back to you, Reid.
Thanks, Natalie. So for our first session, we're going to be joined by George and Colin, co-directors of the Nano Foundation. Nano claims to be the world's most efficient decentralized currency. That's a big claim. Using its own blockchain, they've got zero fees, no crypto mining required. No crypto mining. That isn't awesome, isn't it? That does sound amazing. So George and Colin are going to give us an overview of Web3 and then dive into some of the details and look at why it's important. And I think they might be a bit controversial, but over to you guys. Come up, give them a round of applause.
Right. Hello, everybody. Right. So this is a little bit wobbly, so do bear with us if it does collapse. That will be fine. Righty-ho. Cool. So, hello. I am George Coxon, and this is Colin Mayhew. As Reid so wonderfully said, we are both directors of the Nano Foundation, with Colin being the founder of Nano itself. So currently, Nano is the world's most efficient decentralized currency, and we will be going through that a little bit more in our presentation today. But really, our concepts that we're going to be discussing are, will blockchain, crypto, and Web3 be the change? Well, you may be a little bit surprised by our upcoming thoughts on this. And due to the topics being so large, with only 25 minutes to talk, we are going to be slightly brief with a highlighting overview of our opinions, with decentralization being a theme throughout all these concepts. So let's dive in.
Perfect. I'll go over a little bit about what we're going to talk about. We'll start off with talking about a few of the buzzwords that are in the industry. And we'll go over a few of the definitions, just at a high level, on what they're trying to solve. In the middle, we'll look at what they're trying to solve, how effective they are at these things, and what the projections are for the future of those. And then finally, we'll end up talking a little bit about what we do at Nano Foundation, what is our goal in this whole industry, and what are we aiming for.
Exactly. So, to kick us off, we're going to play a game of buzzword bingo. Who doesn't love a buzzword? Well, us, actually. I mean, introducing you to blockchain's second biggest export, which are buzzwords, after, I think, conferences, which are probably the #1 export of blockchain over the last couple of years. But obviously, we've got a lot of buzzwords here. However, we are only joking. We're not going to play a game here. I think it is important to really hammer in the speculative space that we are currently in this realm. And in this speculative space, there is, a full array of unbanked lexicons used as funding magnets. And we feel it's important to dig a little bit deeper into the concepts behind such buzzwords and reveal if they are idealistic or realistic to the world we live in today. So, Colin, what do buzzwords even mean?
We'll go over a few of these. We'll start right at the top with blockchain or crypto. These are really just generic terms for a variety of technologies made by a lot of people with a focus on decentralization, data immutability, and consensus. So we could start off with there. We'll move on to ICO. This may sound very similar to IPO, and they are very similar. It is a type of security or fundraising mechanism, but these are largely unregistered, as you probably know. Unregistered, unregulated.
Yes.
As the case may be. So we'll move on to the next one. It's an acronym of, or a conjunction of DeFi, decentralized finance. So this is the idea of replacing our existing financial tools, either investments or banking, with decentralized alternatives. Then we'll move on to NFTs. So NFT stands for non-fungible token. Who here knows what fungibility is? A little bit, okay, got some. So fungibility is the interchangeability of something with something very identical. So an example would be a 10-pound note. It doesn't matter whether it's mine or another one. They're all effectively the same thing. They're interchangeable. So non-fungible is the exact opposite, and that's usually applied to, well, they're trying to apply it to artwork and type of things, formerly known as JPEGs. And then finally, we'll hit Web3, which is in a similar way to DeFi, replacing our existing infrastructure with decentralized alternatives, but this is focusing on the web infrastructure itself, attempting to replace it with decentralized alternatives.
I think attempting being a very strong word. Yeah.
So, as George said earlier, what underpins a lot of these things as opposed to traditional technologies is simply the focus on decentralization. So we should really figure out what that term means. So decentralization is a form of redundancy. So just as the same way as companies have redundancy in their infrastructure, perhaps a database, if one fails, another one takes over. Decentralization, as it is in the crypto space, is decentralization effectively of administration of the system. So there is no single actor or single player that is the administrator and can change the rules unilaterally.
An example kind of touted by Web3 is a new uncensored version of Twitter where tweets cannot be moderated or deleted by Twitter. And I think I can ask you that, does anyone actually want that? My personal story as a female leader within the crypto space, and I have harassment thrown at me online on a weekly basis, whether that is an auction on who gets to rape me first, and yes, that is real and online, and I have no power to remove it, or misogynistic abuse. I, for one, believe that we are responsible to create a safe space online for everyone. And that is not reached through decentralizing such platforms, in my opinion. There must be accountability online. I think 4chan, a platform that some of you may know, and I'm sorry if you do, is a great example of an unmoderated social platform known to refuse to remove child pornography and be the birthplace of the incel culture we see rising among so many young men who spend a lot of time online. So who does this benefit decentralizing social platforms and the wider web?
So the question is, when is decentralization useful? Well, far fewer than one might think. Obviously, at Nano, we're focused on decentralization of currency. We think that that's one of the very few actual use cases for decentralization that's effective and desirable. And it may sound good to have a single source of truth. You just connect to a network and you can get either a truth of ownership of property or get this data. It sounds very good, but it does break down when interfacing with the real world. So just a couple of the problems that you can run into. What if a transfer has failed to be recorded on the network? What if the owner's encryption keys are lost? Or what if there's judicial intervention that reassigns ownership of property? Then you have a persistent, immutable ledger that is incorrect. So those type of things need to be thought about when seeing it's useful. So we, George and I, call our industry an industry of solutions looking for a problem. And these are a lot of the things that have been touted over the years. We've been to several conferences before we decided that was not where we wanted to go. But these were the technologies that they talked about. So supply chain tracking, healthcare data storage, uncensorable Twitter, programmable money. All of these things, there can be advantages and improvements to be made in this, but often they're touted as turnkey solutions to this. And not only in our opinion do they not always fully solve the problem, but they introduce a number of other problems that need further solutions in order to solve.
And I think one of our favorite things at the conference was we saw a talk on veganism on the blockchain, which was quite baffling, to say the least.
Farm to fork is a very good... yes, okay, so why do these solutions tend to run into problems? So the elephant in the room when it comes to blockchain and decentralization is simply scaling. Can they compete economically with what we have currently? So high performance computing centers around the concept of divide and conquer. Divide and conquer, asynchronous operation, horizontal scaling. And blockchains simply start out at the very fundamental level slower than their traditional counterparts. They have limited asynchronicity and almost no ability to horizontally scale. So right out of the gate, blockchains start performance bottlenecked, and that results in very low usage numbers. I think what was...
Yeah, so I think the numbers as they say now are cryptocurrency takes up less than 1% of the global economy, yet I'm sure you will see it all over the media, making it a lot larger than it actually is when it comes to real world use.
So this is a little, bit of a breakdown of the categories of things people have tried to solve, and ours is right in the middle. But we'll start at the left, smart contract execution. That's a type of programmable money. Pretty much you can execute programs inside of these platforms. Moving on, you have data immutability. Like I said before, these platforms you can typically only add data to. You typically cannot delete data from them. So they use that property of data immutability in their technologies. There's currency, which is what we're focused on, cryptocurrency. Again, we think that that's one actually good use of decentralization. Naming systems, things like DNS and that like, so they're trying to make decentralized counterparts to that. And then NFTs, obviously. The well-touted, we have a picture of a typical NFT purchaser over there on the right, so.
So obviously, currency, as Colin said, is our focus, and we believe that currency really is actually the only tangible application of blockchain in the real world currently. And so what we're going to go through now is kind of the concept of digital money, the pillars that create digital money, and why we believe, obviously slightly biased, that Nano is digital money and digital cash. That is our goal. So simply put, we built Nano to simply be the most efficient currency the world has ever seen, from the horse's mouth right here. Now, we believe there are 4 main pillars to create a true digital currency. What is the perfect money? So number 1 is transaction capacity. Number 2, speed to finality. Number 3, decentralization, our kind of core theme in our presentation today. And number 4, low fees and a low cost to operate. Now, we're seeing a lot in the space where some assets and some tokens and coins are hitting a few of those, but to get the perfect 4 is really the ideal that we are working towards. So as decentralization, obviously, we haven't picked here, sorry. A bit behind. So as decentralization is obviously kind of a key importance across these new facets and new technologies, Web3, blockchain, cryptocurrency. So where is decentralization important? And we really believe it is important within currency itself. So within cryptocurrency, decentralization is quantified through what we call the Nakamoto coefficient. Now, I'm sure you've all heard of Bitcoin being touted as the most decentralized money that we can ever have. Well, I'm afraid it actually isn't. So the Nakamoto coefficient, the number is that it's the amount of entities, whether that's mining farms, whether that's institutions, that could collude to potentially shut down a network. Now, Bitcoin is 4. It only will take 4 entities or 4 mining farms to come together and take down the network. We're pleased to say that Nano has a decentralization of 11, a Nakamoto coefficient of 11. So we really believe that for a global digital currency, it must be resistant to both failure and attack. Now, a good real-world story of the problems of a centralized currency. So what happened in India in 2016, where the government decided to take 2 notes, and the 2 highest denomination notes, out of the rupee system, which equated to 86% of the country's cash supply. Now, they gave 4 hours notice for this change to happen to combat corruption, and another 50 days after that to transfer your notes. I know we've all changed our pound coins. I think I've got a pot of old pound coins still at home somewhere. However, in this regard, who this really affected were people in rural situations, the poorest of the country, and those with a lack of access to the infrastructure that we so take for granted anyway, and especially women. And there is a real issue when it comes to a centralized or political party, we feel, in deciding a monetary policy to this extent, which doesn't look to the most vulnerable of its population. And that's why we think that decentralization of a currency is incredibly important. So, as we said earlier, we really believe that Nano could really be a global digital cash alternative, nothing more and nothing less. We've designed it to allow you to keep more of your money, so Nano is completely feeless. Our competitors are the Western Unions of this world, where if you work in service in Hong Kong and you want to send your money back to your family in the Philippines, you are sometimes paying 20% for the right to send your money. We do not believe that is fair. Only one person wins out of that, and it's not the person who owns that money. There is an issue here. So, why, talking about cash, why do we think that Nano is better than the cash in your pocket? Well, it's your money. And this kind of does speak for a lot of other cryptocurrencies as well. And we will see the delineation further on. But it is your money, it's not the government's. It is private, secure, and tamper-proof. And you are in control of when you send and spend your own money. I think we've all seen with COVID and the restriction of access to the banking infrastructure or timings of FX trades, there is an issue when it comes to restriction of access. It's inflation resistant, so Nano has been designed to protect its own value. It is a fully a distributed currency. There are 133 million Nano out in the world. But actually, what's hidden are it's times 10 to the 30. There are 30 zeros behind that. And also, it's all in your pocket. All you need is a smartphone and Wi-Fi access. And so that's why we focus on emerging economies, especially. There are 1.7 billion people in the world that do not have an address, and therefore cannot access the banking system that we in the Western world take so for granted. And we really believe that a digital currency, whether it's Nano or something that comes along that's better, we will join them because we really believe this is needed. So why is Nano better than banking institutions? Well, there is no hidden fees, number one. I think we've all been taken aside by a hidden fee at some point in our lives. So 100% of the value is transferred directly to the recipient. It is also lightning fast, so you can send money in 0.2 seconds on average around the world for free. And also it's owned by everyone, decentralized and democratized. It is inflation and manipulation resistant by design. And last but not least, why is Nano different from cryptocurrency? We're actually trying to remove ourselves from the cryptocurrency space, because we are a non-profit organization, which is possibly a unicorn in the cryptocurrency space. We are not backed by greed. We really believe in empowering equal economic opportunity for the wider world, and Nano is our first gift to the world in that realm. Nano is also a currency and not an asset, and I think the majority of the crypto space is all around trading assets and tokens. We are focusing on sending, spending, and accepting Nano in real time versus buying, holding, and selling on market valuation. And most importantly, it is environmentally friendly. Nano does not rely on mining or other energy-intensive activities to hold its value, as we will go through in a second here.
Yep. So the focus on energy efficiency was one of the primary design goals. We think that you can't have this new technology, which is purported to be the future of finance, while it's also consuming exorbitant amounts of energy. And this graph here we put together, or infographic, in order to exemplify that. So on the left, you see one dot, which represents not just one Nano transaction, it represents 12,500 Nano transactions. And on the right-hand side, you can see an equivalent with a Bitcoin transaction. So from an energy consumption standpoint, one Bitcoin transaction is roughly equivalent to 15.5 million Nano transactions. So one Nano transaction is 1/1000th, 1/10,000th of a kilowatt hour, and Bitcoin takes around 1,700 kilowatt hours per transaction.
And we really believe we are in a climate crisis right now. This is not a dystopian future. We are in this crisis right now, and we must have accountability for the technologies we are using and putting forward, and take off our rose-tinted investment spectacles and actually look to the future of these technologies. So as we kind of said earlier, Nano, we are trying to be a global currency. And so just as a currency kind of, in the real world, like the euro, dollar, pound, yen, we spent 2 years researching and creating our own currency symbol, which we're incredibly proud to present. You can see it in the middle here. So just as a currency sign kind of aims to place Nano in the real world requires conformity to the global standardizations following requirements set by the International Organization of Standardization, ISO. So Nano is what is considered to be a supranational currency with no official currency code, and therefore must begin with an X, as per the requirement standards for business and banking globally by ISO 4217. And so we're pretty proud of this. Having taken the X, it means that any other supranational currency cannot use an X as our currency symbol. So X really does mark the spot, and we hope that you'll be seeing and paying with Nano in the future, very near future. So one of the most kind of important and wonderful factors of what we do is our community. So Nano is often known as having the second most active community after Bitcoin, and that is truly down to its ethos of what it could bring to the world, this tangible change of banking and finance accessibility. And this is just a lovely picture of, we especially work in emerging economies. As I said earlier, there's 1.7 billion people in the world that do not have an address, and therefore cannot access the banking system we take for granted. And so we have burgeoning communities, especially in Nigeria, West Africa, and further afield. And this was a wonderful meetup that took place not too long ago, and they actually all screen printed their own Nano t-shirts, which was really cool. And then last but not least, just a little bit around the Nano Foundation. So we believe that changing the world is no small feat, but that is our goal, and we aim to do it one transaction at a time. We really believe in empowering people and businesses with education, advice, opportunities, and most importantly, a digital currency resilient to manipulation, fees, and complexity of traditional currencies traded the world over. Can you do that?
Oh, yes. No, I lost my...
You're doing this there.
Oh, yes. So the Nano Foundation is committed to equal economic opportunity and believes that a currency should be spent, sent, and accepted. And we believe that that is the first step moving forward.
So as you can kind of see, I know that we have spoken a little bit about Nano at the end, but in our minds, we truly believe that out of all of these buzzwords, we think and truly believe that currency is really the only tangible working application of these technologies right now. A lot of our world is hot air, whether that's Web3 and various others, and decentralization obviously being the theme throughout all of them, knitting them all together. Is it realistic or is it idealistic? And are they actually, is decentralization benefiting all of us? Sometimes yes and sometimes no. And that really is it. So as I said, a very brief overview of our feelings on Web3, crypto, and blockchain. So thank you very much for having us.
Thanks, guys. Thank you. Rachel.
Oh, may I have the thing? Thanks. Huge thank you to Team Nano for a really great session. Thank you very much. Next up, we're going to have our myth-busting panel session. For this, we're going to be joined by 4 individuals from across the ecosystem who will explore the environmental, diversity and inclusion, technical and future elements of Web3, blockchain and cryptocurrency.
I'm delighted to be able to introduce you to Giles Hawkins. He's going to be hosting the panel this evening. Giles is the executive chairman of Syntegra and is passionate about making the catastrophic impacts of ransomware a thing of the past. So something a little bit different to blockchain and Web3, but please talk to him afterwards. Giles also, quite conveniently, happens to sit on the ISO Standards Committee for blockchain. Who'd have known that? Brilliant. And distributed ledger technology. So it's really brilliant that we've got Giles. He's agreed to chair the panel. Yeah, great opportunity to really dig into this a bit more. It was so great to hear the Nano Foundation. You'll be around afterwards to take questions. Brilliant. But let's bring the panel on. Giles.
Like questions?
Sorry.
Thank you, Reid. The mic's on. That's always a good start.
We are using Slido for questions, so please be thinking about your questions now and getting them on there just for the panel. Make sure that they're quite difficult as well, please. Thanks.
Thanks, Reid. Appreciate that. First things first, I want to thank everybody at CyNam for the event today. I know how hard these things are to put on. It all looks like it runs like clockwork, and actually it has, but it's not easy to make it do that. So big thanks to the whole team. They've done a great job. And then there's another elephant in the room. It's amazing. You wouldn't think you fit 2 elephants in a room like this, would you? But building on the one that the guys mentioned before, we've got one here which the panel were absolutely agreed they wanted to make clear, is that we are going to touch a little bit on diversity and inclusion. And it may not have escaped your attention that we're an all-white panel. That's not by design, I can assure you. There was never the intention. And it doesn't, we need to do something to change it going forward. I think we all understand that. My experience is that if you want things to change, you actually have to live the change and demonstrate its benefits to people before anything's going to change. And also, you can't wait to be asked. You've got to do the asking if you want change to happen. So what I do is I encourage everybody from any background, ask to get involved. You push yourself forward and make that step. Just be prepared for knockbacks. There's a great quote from Michael Jordan. I think he's the most successful basketball player in the world because he's the one who's failed the most. He's missed the most shots. And I think that I've probably had that experience in my own career, is that I've been turned down for more, when I've made requests, more often than I've been successful. And so if we're going to get a different type of panel in the future, it's only because people are going to come forward and ask the opportunity. So please, I'd encourage everyone to do that. All right, we got that out of the way. What I think I've benefited most from a diversity in my career is the diversity of thinking. It's having the different opinions in the room, the different backgrounds, the different experiences. It generally leads to better solutions. I think it's hard to argue with that. And I hope that what we can do today, in fact, I'm pretty confident what we can do today, is with these three wonderful panelists, is we're going to bring you some diversity of thinking. And if we're not, and this was my plug for Slido, please fire more difficult questions at us to get some more interesting views out of these three. I think you're probably going to get some anyway. Okay, right, so what that brings me on to then is who we've got here as panelists. So firstly, we've got Rachel Kelly. Rachel is the founder of The Liminality, a sustainability consultancy, and also the project coordinator of a local climate solutions hub, Planet Cheltenham. Rachel previously spent 12 years in sustainable finance working on ESG research, analysis and communications, and is now focused on helping organisations to think regeneratively. God, some great words in here. You're testing me out, aren't you? I should have had a glass of wine. Regeneratively, prioritising people and planet. She's passionate about empowering people around climate solutions, supporting youth activism and multi-solving projects that address environmental and social crises. And she did specifically ask me to mention that she also loves skating, roller skating. So just get that in there. All right, Rachel, thank you for being here. Secondly, we've got Sarah Kenshaw, a partner in the technology and data practice at BPE. BPE is a Cheltenham-based solicitors practice, punching far above its weight in terms of size and reach, with many well-known national and London clients, as well as clients from the Southwest. Sarah works closely with those powering the next generation of technology, from revolutionary AI companies to influential policy leaders advising on business models and commercial transactions. Her track record and industry-wide reputation were noted in the Legal 500, which describes Sarah as brilliant, accompanied by a Band 1 ranking. Sarah holds a master's degree in comparative intellectual property law. Thank you, Sarah.
Pleasure.
And finally, but not least, we get James Phillips. James is a security researcher from Roke. Roke conceive, design, and secure the world's most technically advanced data and communication systems for government and industry. He's been working with computers his entire life, from data center design, solution architecture, networking, application development, and system security. Currently, James is leading Roke's vulnerability research team. He believes there is a long journey ahead for Web3 to survive the InfoSec battlefield. Okay. Please welcome our panelists. Brilliant. They're going to be doing a lot of work, and so I thought I'd get you lot to do a bit of work first for your free tickets. So very quick pop quiz, not really a quiz, a bit of more of a show of hands. Firstly, who owns any cryptocurrency or any NFT? Stick your hands up. One panelist, wow, and a few people, maybe half the people in the room. That's interesting. So we need to know about you if we're going to make this discussion relevant. How many cryptocurrencies do we think there are in the world at the moment? And I'm going to put bigger and bigger numbers, and put your hands down when you think we've got to the limit. So I'm going to give you an easy one to start with. Are there more than 5? Most people. I can't see anyone that hasn't got a hand up, but there might be 1 or 2. Okay, what about more than 500? I don't think I've seen any hands go down. More than 5,000? Still a lot of hands up. Okay, more than 10,000. Ooh, okay, now we're getting there. What about more than 20,000? Still a few out there. Well, I'm amazed that you're quite that bold about it. There's actually 19,000, approximately. Right, there may just be over 20,000 now. There's more and more every day. It's a lot, right? And the CEO of Ripple said thousands of cryptocurrencies will disappear. So just bear that in mind when you're making your next cryptocurrency investment. Third question. Some of you may have seen recently that the cryptocurrency Luna and its associated stablecoin both disappeared. Dropped in value to 0 and now aren't available. So hands up if you think the price of Bitcoin today is less than 50% of its high point this year. Not many people think it's that low. And you'd be right, it's actually 62% of its high for the year. However, it's only 45% of its high for the last 12 months. Massively volatile, right? This is a currency, is it? Or is it an investment? Fourth question, it's only 5, I'm going nearly there. Has anyone, stick your hands up, if anyone has used blockchain for anything other than a cryptocurrency or an NFT? Wow, we've got some. I wasn't expecting actually to see any, but there are a few. That's good, right? Because it can do other things, and we might explore some of that. And finally, has anyone used a distributed ledger technology other than blockchain? Would you even know if you had? There's one here. We've got an expert sitting in the front here. Great. Some good questions. Oh, and on the panel as well. So yeah, there are other distributed ledger technologies out there other than blockchain. Blockchain is one particular type. There are many others. I'd encourage you all to go and do some research. There's some interesting ones out there actually based around graphs and really funky technologies. Right, that's enough of that. Panelists know a bit about the audience now. You know a bit about the panelists, so let's get on with it. First, environmental. There's an obvious killer question here. We touched on it briefly before. Rachel, is blockchain going to eat the world?
It's really interesting, and I think the graph that you folks from Nano showed just shows how incredibly large the footprint is of those proof of work, like Bitcoin. I think the focus from environmentalists tends to be on the energy use. So it is just enormous. It's 0.5% of global energy use, I think, which is not trivial. That is a huge amount. But actually the more worrying thing from my perspective, and I think what we're seeing more from climate groups in the US, is that Bitcoin mining is actually resurrecting zombie fossil fuel infrastructure. So exactly at the point at which we should be walking away and keeping it in the ground, coal-fired power stations that have been sat dormant for decades are suddenly being lit up again because of Bitcoin mining. And that is obviously terrible environmentally, but also even if you look at a hyper-local level in those communities, it's often marginalised communities that are living next door. And yes, there's the greenhouse gas emissions associated, but there's also the mercury poisoning and everything else that goes along with burning coal that you would not want to be living next door to. So yeah, that's the really worrying thing for me, is that, I think obviously the argument is around we're going to see this move from proof of work to proof of stake. And that, that is a feature of innovation in new technologies, that you kind of go through clunky initial stages and then it evolves and becomes more efficient. We do not have time to be inefficient and to be burning fossil fuels that, frankly, we shouldn't be burning. So yeah, that would be my take on Bitcoin.
So what can people here in the room do about it?
I mean,
buy Nano, buy Ethereum.
Buy Nano.
I don't want to. I'm not getting paid commission actually, so.
I'd also say, it's really positive that Ethereum are making a U-turn on this. They've made a lot of headway with their proof of stake. Is getting rolled out to their testnet soon. The technology behind their proof of stake system is going to hopefully pave the way for future projects to just, look at that and say, look, well, there's no point going proof of work. I think you'd have to be pretty crazy to start a new blockchain solution of any type and go with proof of work, given the bad press, etc. At this point,
Yeah, I mean, I hear all that, and it's very interesting. I mentioned the other types of distributed ledger technology away from pure blockchain and proof of work. Some of them are much more efficient. We've seen Nano, and I think that's based on some of the graph technology that is much more efficient. And I think that's probably where we need to be thinking. And everyone in this room can make a difference. There are a number of people who put their hands up saying they own Bitcoin or some kind of cryptocurrency. Well, did you think about the impact that you're making when you bought it? Maybe we all ought to start doing that, right? Be the change, as the phrase was up there. So that's our first myth that we wanted to bust. Is it all bad? And I think the answer is it's not all bad. There are good solutions out there. There are better solutions, at least.
I mean, I can chip in there as well.
Yeah, please.
So I come at, in my practice, I see this from a slightly different perspective. So Bitcoin doesn't really feature. I mean, nobody comes to consult me about their Bitcoin very well, at least not what I do in technology law. But smart contracts in the Ethereum blockchain, they crop up weekly, daily. I mean, I have many clients who are doing projects which are leveraging the Ethereum blockchain to build Web3. Now, the interesting thing on diversity and environment is, well, ESG, I'm looking at the S, which is the social. So in some of the things that my clients are creating, it's about trusted data flows, and it's trying to create the big data that we can then pull and run the AIs that are being developed over these big data to solve some of the biggest problems of our day. I mean, you can look at climate change, you can look at feeding the world, and these are some of the the problem statements that are being put forward to look at how we create the efficiencies in some of these different industry sectors. And we'll come to some of the examples of some of these things that are happening. And it's up in these worlds of creating big data, running AI over the big data to solve the problem statements, then Ethereum blockchain has a role. But it's about the only blockchain I've come across that's being used outside of cryptocurrency in Web3, I'd say.
Yeah, so actually touching on that, Sarah, one thing I did want to make sure we brought out from you is that we touched on diversity already, but what about this problem of bias built into technology?
So I mean, that's a great point, and that's where you look at the likes of, over time, I think you'll find two things there. You have ethical statements around the AI, and they will, over time, probably publish, because transparency is going to be key to how we adopt and use AI. They'll publish their ethical statements about how they go about training their data. And then, additionally, I think you might find there's a role for standards. And there are already data standards sort of jostling for position. And part of those data standards will probably be ethical statements around provenance, around accuracy, and also empowerment about people, if it's personal data that's involved, about people being able to withdraw their data from data pools that are having AI run over. So all that falls within the social, because ultimately if people are more empowered, they will actually be more prepared to share their data. And interestingly, as a side, the GDPR we will hear so much about was actually originally conceived to create a free market in data, to allow data to flow, because the idea was originally that if people trusted the entities who were using their data, they were much more likely to share it on the knowledge that they trusted the entities and they could pull it back and feel empowered if they didn't like what the entities were doing. Now, we've sort of lost sight of that a little bit, perhaps, but it's going to come to the fore, I suspect, in Web3.
I think we'll probably come back to GDPR. I'm sure we'll touch on that again, even in the context of blockchain. So, James, I saw a stat today which shocked me a little bit, which is that, and I don't know why it shocked me particularly, but it said that 91.7, very specific figure, percentage of Web3 developers are men. You know, that's probably, does that still reflect the IT world in general? Probably affects the security world, as I can tell, as far as I can tell. I don't know, you know, how are we addressing, or are you seeing any signs of us addressing this problem that the systems are going to have inbuilt bias because they're being built by people with probably unconscious bias?
That's a very good point. You've caught me out a little bit there, I must say. I mean, absolutely, if we don't get the diversity of developers in there, then that is a fundamental issue that needs to be addressed.
And I think I think George, you already spoke to the toxicity and it's I hesitate to even call it debate because it's almost like you can't debate. It's just, you know, if you're in certain social media spaces, you're not safe if you're a woman or a person of colour in those spaces. And I think regardless of whether we're talking about the climate crisis or adoption of new technology, especially on the gender front, if you're not, you're basically doing it with one arm tied behind your back globally if you've only got one gender involved in that.
Yeah, so I think there's a starting point, right? There's a fundamental problem about these issues of being built into the technology itself and the way that technology is designed to be used. Rachel, sticking with you for the moment, a little bit about decentralized finance was mentioned before, and you know, there's a great the theory and the concept behind DeFi is good, right? Let's get it out there, let's make it more accessible. But what's the reality? What's your take on, are we really decentralizing finance and bringing people in, or is it a bit different?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. So I'm in this context, we're really lucky here in Cheltenham to be one of 10 cohorts across the UK who are doing donut economics learning journeys. So I don't know if anyone's heard of Kate Raworth, the British economist, who wrote a brilliant book called Donut Economics, which is about shifting economies from being focused purely on GDP growth to something different, which actually represents living within planetary boundaries but with a social foundation. So that's the donut, is the middle is the social foundation, the outside is the planetary boundaries. And a big part of what she talks about is being distributive by design and decentralization. And I think it's an interesting one because, you know, from a lot of what I've been reading around the shift to proof of stake especially, is that kind of, there is this sort of pure ideology around like total decentralization, but proof of stake involves, it's pay to play, isn't it? So you've got to have a lot of money to do that. And also, obviously, the other shift that we're seeing is towards regulation. And I think George is right when she says that that's necessary in a lot of ways. But yeah, it's how you strike that balance between being distributive by design and democratizing economies and finance, whilst also somewhat centralizing it in order to protect people.
It's not an easy problem, and I think there's a lot to be done. I mean, these buzzwords get thrown around, and it's very easy to latch onto them and say, oh, great, there's a solution out there, everything's going to be better, but it's hard, and probably regulations needed.
I think that's human nature. You know, I think whether it's the climate or something else, it's really human nature to go, where's the silver bullet?
Yeah.
And often with systems theory, we know it's really complicated and it's really complex, and there probably isn't one answer. There's probably a lot of different answers.
Some incredible situations arise. I mean, some that just seem outstanding that you wouldn't think of. But I was involved on the fringes of a project with the government a good few years ago now, in the very early days of blockchain, and it wasn't called DeFi then, but that's what it was, and trying to roll out a sort of an inclusive banking and saving type system to the unbanked, and you know, people built this solution and got to the point where they're going to roll it out in a town in the north of England, and got there and said, okay, great. And then it's only then they really thought about, hang on, who's going to use this? You need an iPad or you need a phone. That's £1,000, right? Or £500, whatever it was to start with, before you could even use it. It's just incredible the kind of mistakes that get made. There's a lot of learning to do. James, there is some hope, I think, or there may be. You can tell us, right? The expert. So, DAOs, distributed autonomous organizations.
Yeah,
Tell us a little bit about those. Have we got some hope here?
Absolutely. So the concept comes from a book called Reinventing Organizations by a chap called Frederick Laloux, and that is the main ethos behind the DAO principles that Ethereum have picked up. Now, I mainly know about Ethereum, so all the stuff that I say about Web3, good and bad, is pretty much about Ethereum, because for me, that's the one I've followed the most. Really impressed with the Nano stuff that you guys have presented today, and I do agree that I think currency is probably the best application for blockchain tech at the moment. But yeah, when we get onto distributed autonomous organizations, they are fascinating things that are going on. There is recently there was one for the Ukraine. So there's a Ukraine DAO that raised 7 million in a few days, and put some governance in place, and people were able to help plot routes out of the Ukraine for people and organise around that. And I think there are impact DAOs. This is the better side of Web3, I feel. So there's what's called impact DAOs, and people that are making regenerative sort of schemes and things like that around environment, in which you can join these distributed these DAOs, and you can have real impact on real world issues. Bringing education to people in Africa. There are lots of developers working on open source software, and all the governance works around tokenization, and you vote with tokens, and you have a treasury that everyone puts into. And it seems like a really quick way of getting groups of people together. They're interested in making a real impact. So that, to me, is one of the more positive things, and one of the things I find fascinating around Web3 is distributed autonomous organisation. Yeah.
It's a very early area. I mean, all of this technology is, right? None of this stuff is particularly mature right now, but certainly DAOs are.
There's hundreds of them. There's probably some really daft ones as well, I'd imagine.
There are very many daft ones. It's a good place to spend a few hours rather than skipping through cat pictures or whatever.
And hands up, I joined one to try and buy the US Constitution.
Did you bring it with you tonight, the Constitution?
No, because we were second, me and the other 500,000 people that tried to do it. But what happened there was I think it was Sotheby's, the auction was at Sotheby's. They raised 19 million. They were actually second. The guy that won it had beef with the Web3 industry, so he wanted to take us out. But I still own those coins, and it was an interesting experiment. And I think that DAOs haven't had their moment to shine, and that could have been one of them that pushed it out into the media, for people to say, hang on a second, a bunch of nerds bought the US Constitution, how did that happen? I would have loved that. It would have been a great front page story. It really got DAOs out there into people's mind. But I encourage everyone to look that up. I think it's one of the more interesting elements of at least Ethereum.
Yeah, I think there is some hope there. But, yeah, early days.
There's
Let's.
oh, sorry.
Carry on.
No, I was going to add on because there's a lot of climate ones popping up now as well, and a guy reached out to me who's at the University of Bath. They're doing a study on this as we speak, and they haven't really. I think they're due to release all the findings soon, but they started off, and I think they had thousands of these like climate-focused ones. And they picked each one apart, and the ones that they got left with where they felt there was any environmental impact at all, there was 80 left that were then the focus of the study to like, okay, well, what is it that they're actually doing? And then, Web3 is this new world and the Wild West and everything. Combine that with carbon offsets, which is the real Wild West at the moment. It's kind of, and there's so much around, I don't think many people kind of set up companies or set up things because they want to ruin the planet for their grandchildren. Like, I don't think they're going into that thinking this. But actually, I think rather than kind of, there was one where it was like buying chunks of Amazon rainforest, which sounds like, okay, well, maybe that's good because you're going to stop it from being logged illegally. But where's this kind of like, if you were a company going in to do something there, you would need free prior informed consent from Indigenous people and local people, and that land is best managed by the people who live there and understand the ecosystems and infrastructure. So I don't necessarily think that, as cool as you put it, I don't think a bunch of nerds buying the Amazon is the answer either.
It's really interesting, isn't it? I think increasingly, and this is probably not specific to blockchain or DLT type technology. It's probably just about technology and money. People with money and people with technology think they can solve problems, but they may not. They may have forgotten to ask what the problem was in the first place, all right? And what do people want? And I think that's been a problem in technology as long as I've been involved in technology, 30 plus years at least.
There is at least some thinking that I have read around making sure that the people in those communities end up running the DAO and somehow having the overall stake of governance in those programs. So whether that's happening or not, I'm not sure. Who knows? Wild West. But I have seen a lot of people saying, we need to solve this issue if, someone in, a massive group of people in Australia controlling the Amazon rainforest doesn't make sense. Like, the locals need to control it. How do we make sure that that DAO is mainly governed by those people?
Yeah. Okay, look, a huge area there, right? Environmental, social responsibility, all this kind of stuff. We've only been able to skim it. Let's move on to some of the technical aspects. It was mentioned in the discussion before around decentralization. It's a phrase that's thrown around all the time around this kind of technology. But James, is it really decentralized?
Well, I'm going to lean on Moxie Marlinspike's intro to Web3. If anyone knows who he is, so he's the Signal founder. He's also the person that implemented end-to-end crypto for WhatsApp, Facebook, Skype. Very famous American cryptographer. He said, hey, I want to play in crypto. I want to see what this space is all about. So he built some NFTs. He built some smart contracts. And he, Wiresharked some requests and responses and looked at the network traffic. It kind of turns out that actually our endpoints, our phones aren't able to really directly communicate with the blockchain itself or verify what's on the blockchain itself. So we go through a couple of APIs that are provided by 2, 3, maybe 3 different providers to actually get that data back. Unfortunately, none of that data is really verified unless you go off and do it yourself, which end users are not going to do. So we were already seeing centralization of connectivity to the blockchain via these API providers. And another thing he pointed out around NFTs was that an NFT is essentially a URL that points to some data somewhere. The NFT doesn't contain a hash of that data. And that data is just out on a web server somewhere. And if someone changes what that data is on the web server, then say to a poo emoji, then your $100 million NFT is now a poo emoji, and there's not much you can do about it. So there's some work to be done there, I feel. as well. And that's one of the experiments he did. So he sold NFTs on OpenSea and then flipped them all to poo emojis. As you know, hackers do.
Of course. It's something that came up a lot in early discussions in the standards committees, actually, where, what are good design principles? You've got to be really careful the way these things are designed, because it's not very difficult for people, for control of the technology to be centralized. So the system might work in a decentralized way, or distributed way, I should say, actually more accurately. There might be lots of endpoints, but the control of the technology and the way that it works, and the control of the consensus mechanism can be heavily centralized. And if you don't look under the covers, you don't realize what's going on. And I think that's something, again, that happens a lot with early stage technologies. It's all a bit, smoke and mirrors. But what's really going on? And you should definitely challenge these things.
One of the main behaviors there as well is that that he points out very well is that people don't want to run their own servers. Like Web 1 was like we were running our email servers, maybe some DNS servers and stuff like that. No one wants to run their own services. That's why we have Amazon Web Services and these huge cloud providers now everywhere, because they're running all the crap that we don't want to have to build ourselves and run ourselves and maintain ourselves. Is Web3? Are we gonna start running the entire blockchain at home to validate stuff that these API providers are sending back to us? It's just a bit of a security nightmare for my liking. But there is progress being made.
Well. I mean, there's the privacy point as well. We were talking about, weren't we, in the context of the blockchain. Is your data private? Is it considered personal data? Can it be seen? And originally, when the blockchains first came out, we thought about it as anonymized. On the whole, people just accepted it's anonymous because that was the view. It's decentralized, it's anonymous, you can't be seen. But actually, as we got to understand the technologies a bit better, it started becoming quite clear that it actually probably isn't anonymized. It's what you'd call pseudonymized, and there's a whole spectrum of pseudonymized depending on the actual technology you're looking at. And I was just talking to James earlier, and actually what I hadn't quite appreciated is these APIs can see exactly what you're doing. So that's pushing the pseudonymized thing into the almost personal space. So again, you have all these GDPR issues suddenly appearing. So once data is pseudonymized or personal, you have GDPR issues. So then, of course, you have this issue about how do you create the compliance, which we need in this world, to create the trust for people to use it, to know that their data is secure, their data's, somebody's accountable to making sure that it's not being published and not available and not being hacked. And so you move back to needing a centralized, controlling mind a little bit. So you need a touch of centralization, perhaps, to create the trust you need. Because the decentralization actually is not creating the trust. Because you're seeing you can hack it. The security is not good enough. You can hijack personal data because those controls aren't in place.
I think it's, again, very interesting. It's you've got to be careful what you wish for. Everybody thinks, decentralized, no government control, no standards. Brilliant, won't it? And it often doesn't turn out to be quite so brilliant because it lets a lot of bad actors get involved and take over. And often people need protecting from that.
Yeah, and actually there's the fraud issue as well. And we were just talking about that with Rachel as well. So you think about it's secure, except that it's not entirely secure. But you think the blockchain and people talk about that as being a bit of a wild west, and the money's used for Bitcoin's used for bad, for money laundering. But then again, of course, so is normal cash at the end of the day. So it's not all bad on Bitcoin. Equally, I mean, for example, in the financial system, we have vast amounts of fraud in our payment transactions, all the phishing fraud. I have some clients who deal with all that, and the fraud is immense. We're looking at $1 billion in fraud. About 25% of those fraudulent transactions that go through our financial system is organised crime, in fact, largely in London.
But I think, and as you mentioned with North Korea's nuclear program, it would be slightly harder and more visible for them to fund that through traditional finance.
Well, exactly. So it goes the other way. So you keep batting it back. So on the one hand, you get a lot of fraud in the real system. On the other hand, you've got a lot of bad stuff going on there. So neither's good, actually. There's fraud across the whole lot.
Very interesting. Again, we very quickly realised in the ISO panel that what we ended up doing actually was pointing to a lot of other existing standards, because a lot of the problems in blockchain and distributed ledger technology are not new problems. It's just technology at the end of the day, right? And it can be used for good and it can be used for bad. And it can be implemented well and implemented badly. And it won't take any of you very long to Google security attacks against blockchain. And you'll find loads of really easy ones. I mean, it's quite scary. This is not a perfectly secure technology. It's not perfectly immutable. It's not perfectly anonymous.
It's only been 6 days since the last 100 million went missing from smart contracts.
There we go. Okay, all right. Look,
It's in my wallet.
we could spend all day on technology and technology issues with this type of technology, and we don't have all day left, I'm afraid. And there's probably a bar after this that lots of people want to get to. So I'm not going to be the one to keep everyone from it. I wanted to move on. There is some hope, right? If I can get my notes in the right order. There's some future. We are in the very early days. I mean, the classic American phrase, early innings. I'm a baseball nut, so I'll use early innings. There's a long way to go with all this technology. So let's focus on that for a bit. Apparently, there was $25 billion of investment in 2021 in blockchain and blockchain-related technologies, DLT technologies. Recently, just in the last month or so, Andreessen Horowitz, a private equity firm in the US, raised $4.8 billion to invest in Web3 projects. So, James, where is all this money going to go? What are the interesting opportunities here? What are the things with real promise? Can you give us some examples?
That's a very good question. I'd like to see some money getting spent on smart contract auditing, which is very specific, but also most of the money that's leaking out of Ethereum and into North Korea's nuclear program probably is coming from completely unaudited smart contracts. Like, a smart contract is just code. So as a security researcher, looking at attack surface of a platform, I'm like, where's all the code at? Show me the code. More lines of code equals bugs. You know, Apple, Google, Microsoft can't secure their own products with state-of-the-art equipment and state-of-the-art security research teams. Anyone can write a smart contract, ingest $100 million. No one has to look at that. No one has to verify that code. And so for me, I want to see some of that money invested in security, road mapping at least, around smart contracts, and I think the fundamentals are there. The blockchain, the cryptography around that is all sound, but certainly with smart contracts, which again is really interesting area of Web3 for me, is this application layer, being able to create applications and decentralized applications, really, really interesting. But at the moment, just shockingly insecure.
And actually, on the smart contract front, the interesting thing about those is they're really driving automation, digital automation. So as well as being behind current cryptocurrencies, they're the myriad handshakes that take place machine to machine. So when you think about smart cities and smart roads and there's smart everything these days, and basically what they're talking about is machine to machine to machine, coming back to trusted data flows, throwing through all these to make our lives easier. But in order for that to work, the data has to flow, and the machines enter into these little small contracts, which are little handshakes all across the system, and sort of delivering the data through. And every time you have an edge device, which has to communicate with another device, and it basically a smart contract, as James said, it's if this, then that. It can be very basic, but it can monitor a series of obligations, and it can self-execute once the obligations are fulfilled. Now, imagine, as you say, the more code, the more chances of hackers getting into the system. So I would agree with James. I would say digital assurance is absolutely fundamental, and that is looking at the diagnostics across your firewalls and all the accesses to your system. But it's not just your system, it's your supply chains as well, because these handshakes are taking place across ecosystems as digital relationships are flowing through those ecosystems. They're all connected. And so you have to push supply chain controls as well as your own security.
It's interesting, isn't it? It's not the sexiest use case for $4.8 billion is security and governance and compliance. But it might be the thing that makes this work.
Yeah. Monitoring as well. It took one decentralized financial protocol 7 months to realize they lost $90 million.
Yeah.
And it's like, this is solved in InfoSec. It's like, hey guys, monitoring, has anyone got their eyes on the prize here?
Yeah, let's get back to those tried and tested methods. Again, another interesting, one of the most insightful comments I think I heard in the first year, probably of the ISO committee, was that smart contracts, those are those things that are neither smart nor are they contracts. So you just, again, think about what you're actually engaging with and don't just read the headlines. Okay, we've got to keep moving on. Rachel, I know you had something that sounded a bit more positive,
Oh,
right? There is some hope. There is hope out there. Tell
Yeah,
us
there
about
was a
your-
really cool. I quite like the people who are kind of openly being like, yeah, we think this is all not great, but then using it in subversive ways. So yeah, it was an entrepreneur in Nigeria who has set up this company called Looty, Looty. And what they did was they took smartphones into the British Museum and did LiDAR scans of like the Benin bronzes and African art, and then sold them as NFTs, but then used the proceeds to fund artists in Nigeria who were producing stuff, and it just started a lot of really interesting conversations, which was like, why are the real ones there and the scans here? Like, shouldn't it be the other way around? So it started some interesting conversations.
Again, early days. I think there are some interesting. That's got to be a better use of money in this technology, though, than what was it? Jack Dorsey's first tweet sold for $3 million.
Yeah, but
Really?
someone tried to resell that recently, and I don't think they got more than $200 bid or something. I might be wrong. Might be the wrong tweet. But
There is some crazy stuff going on. I don't profess to understand it, I'll have to admit, because I managed to right-click on an NFT of an egg, I think. It's some rotating egg, and it was beautifully done, I can tell you. It was a great piece of digital artwork, but I could right-click on it and save it. I had it as my screensaver for a while. I mean, I have no idea what it sold for, but, you know, there didn't seem to be any legal copyright protection or anything around it. What did people pay for? So
I mean, like the younger crowd, like, you know, I'm over 40, so the younger crowd, they have a different perception of digital value. Like, my son just loves Roblox and just wants to buy swords and hats at Roblox. So if I give him, you know, if anyone gives him any pocket money, it's like, I want a digital asset. And I just think, you know, that's what we've got to keep our eye on as well, is like the younger generation's perception of value is really where this market's going, you know. The metaverse.
Last example, and then we'd come to you, Sarah, for probably our last insightful, you know, try and raise the mood of the room a bit from all the doom and gloom, and then we're going to get some great questions that I've got coming through on here. So very quickly, I'm involved with an organisation over in the US called JLinks, and they've set up a public benefit corporation, actually, and what their mission is all around putting control of data back into the individual's hands rather than centralising it all in companies. It's a very noble ambition, and they're doing it through micro-ledgers and some interaction with a blockchain, but keeping data away from centralised technologies. And I think it's a great concept, but they're finding it very difficult to raise any money because it's not the most sexy, and also it relies on citizens taking control and doing things themselves. And frankly, we're all lazy. We don't want to do that. We don't want to run our own servers. We don't want to set our own permissions. But there are some interesting some people exploring some interesting ideas about how those permissions and our permissions around our data can be automated, and that's worth researching if anybody's got an interest in that area. Okay, Sarah, let's finish on you and our final chance of making something positive out of all of this. You've got an interesting, or you've come across some interesting opportunities around, well, you're better to explain it than me, but data trusts, is that the right way to describe it?
Yeah, data trusts. So data trusts are ultimately part and parcel of what I was talking about earlier. So I come at this from more of an Ethereum side of things, rather than the cryptocurrency side of things, and you looking at how you pool data to run AIs over that data to solve problems. Now, you can do that at an industry level, you can do it at an enterprise level, you could do it across group companies, you could do it globally, or you could do it in the UK. But these are called data trusts, data institutions. And it's a means by which you have a steward, a neutral steward, who is, for all intents and purposes, the controlling mind. But they're very light touch. They're there to neutrally steward the data that all the different parties are pooling. This is generally enterprise data at the moment. So we are working on one called the Construction Data Trust. And there are quite a lot of big construction players who are participating in the data trust to test it, to see if this works. And so they will be pouring data in against a given problem that the industry has decided they need to solve. And often could be a climate change problem, or it could be a pure efficiency problem. And in doing so, we then run the analytics over and produce the results, which will be, well, this is how this works, this is how... And hopefully you produce quite a lot of efficiencies out of that. And you can have overlapping data trusts as well. So there's a Net Zero Technology Centre, is a data trust that is shortly going to look at data. That's the former oil and gas decommissioning body. So again, they're looking at how do they across that industry pool data, because of course these are often competitors, so you can't pool data so easily. And so you have the neutral steward there. And the third example is an interesting one because it leverages everything to do with Web3. So it takes the concept of a data trust in the sort of more real world, sort of last year's technology where we pull data, we run AIs, and we get results to see about efficiency and the like. This one now is interesting because it's actually leveraging the blockchain to create the data trust. So it's the Ethereum blockchain, and it has a privacy permissioning piece, and those who are pouring data in to solve the problems are actually individuals. And so the individuals will be encouraged because there's actually an output as well. There's a service that actually they want. It's in the financial service industry as well, this particular vertical. And it's a service that most individuals will use at some point, in a year. And in order to use the service, they're encouraged to share their data, but they don't have to, and they don't even need to get the service. But in doing so, you can then pull the data and you solve the problem. So it combines blockchain, smart contracts, Ethereum, and data trust all coming together.
Well, I'm glad we could finish on something that sounded like it has potential, right? I do think if you look at where the value in terms of stock markets lies at the moment anyway, what are the most valuable companies in the world? They're the ones with the most data. And it's usually ring-fenced and hidden and abstracted from everyone else. Yeah. And if we can start to democratize data a bit and access to data, and then maybe there's a more level playing field.
And in fact, you actually hit that point. So one of the companies that is helping collaborate here is a well-known big data company that holds an awful lot of people's data, but sees how the world is moving along to a more democratized opening up of data. And they're starting to realize that Web3 is actually going to undercut them. And so they're actually they're participating. They're pouring their own data into this data trust as well to see what they can get out of it.
Whew, there's something positive on the horizon.
Yeah, I mean, I think all this investment you're talking about, the billions of investment, I think that it is moving into the infrastructure of Web3. And we're at the early days, I suppose, of the Wild West, but little by little, the Wild West was, the railroad was actually finished, wasn't it? And we all lived there.
All right, we've got some brilliant questions. It's been fascinating, and I would love to spend many more hours, and I'm sure anyone here who wants to catch any of us can reach out, pick up the discussion, probably find us in a bar somewhere, I'd imagine, a bit later. By all means, do that. But there are some quick questions on here that I haven't got time to read them all out. There's plenty, which is good. Some very interesting ones. So, this first one, very simply stated, and a quick answer, please, on all of these. I'm old. James, what is buying a roadblock?
Roblox is a really good model for what a metaverse might be. There's like thousands and thousands of games that the developers have managed to get the kids to develop. So it's kind of like Minecraft, but there's millions of servers, and they've got their own currency, and it's its own self-contained little metaverse, and that's what it is.
Good. All right. Rachel, what is the biggest fear for the next 5 years?
Mine personally.
Well, not personal fear. No, let's keep it about blockchain, shall we?
Well, yeah, in the context of my industry, it's that we're not on track to decrease emissions by half by the end of this decade.
Nice.
And how is technology, all of those billions going into this space, where are the billions that need to be going into climate solutions?
I'll share mine very quickly. Mine is probably that there's what everybody thinks is this hugely promising technology area, and if we're not careful and we don't challenge it enough, it'll just be another way to subvert our freedoms, our wealth and all that kind of stuff. So there's plenty to be fearful of, but to embrace it, I think. Okay, let me try and get some of the other some brilliant questions on here. Let's get one for Sarah. Innovation of technology is often driven by startups. These startups are often driven by persons with agnetic qualities. I'm not sure I know that word. How can we shift this culture to increase inclusivity? So a cultural question there about what can we do?
Well, there's an awful lot of there's a lot of inclusivity. I mean, there's a lot of networking spaces for startups. I mean, for example, Bristol's notorious for its, not notorious, but it's very well known for its Engine Shed, which is a very diverse group of startups. And I don't think they're necessarily all charismatic. They're just normal. And here we've got quite a lot of incubators as well. I mean, there are a lot of once you start looking, there are a lot of networking opportunities, a lot of incubators, there's a lot of support out there. There's a lot of law firms and accountancies who are prepared to offer startup packages, as we do. So, yeah, I don't think you have to be a charismatic founder who does TED Talks. I think if you've got a really good idea and you're able to protect it and you're able to start getting out there and networking, there's a lot of money out there, and if it's the right idea, you've got as much chance as anyone else.
So I think, tying in the amount of money that's been raised, 4.8 billion, and there's plenty more than that, right? That's one fund. And the fact I said that to make a change, you've got to do something. You've got to step forward. I think there's a call to arms here, in a sense to let's get out there and let's try, right?
Yeah,
make
it comes back to your very first point actually as well. You just step forward, get out there, share your ideas. And
we got some challenging questions here as well, which I shouldn't ignore. So, Rachel, how can you link the re-emergence of coal burners exclusively to cryptocurrency mining over general increased energy usage?
Yeah, so the ones, there's a few different ones, and actually in really positive news, just last weekend, New York State actually have a ban now on basically, fossil fuel infrastructure just restarting for Bitcoin mining. So the ones that have restarted, and there's a few different examples. There's one, I think it's Seneca Lake, which was a coal-fired power station, defunct for 10 years, not working. And then I think the company was Marathon, maybe, who it's purely Bitcoin mining. That's all they do. So they have their massive rigs on site, and that's just what they're doing. So it's not they're not restarting them to add to the grid. And in fact, coal-fired power stations, I can't remember what the percentage figure is, but it's going down. The trend is still downwards in the US. But the issue is that anything that's kind of reviving stuff artificially is a bad idea, because you're kind of extending the life of this infrastructure.
Okay, and another quick one for you. How does blockchain energy usage compare to cloud data storage use?
Yeah, that's a good one. I think it's less, energy usage is less than data storage overall. So that's it's still a lot. But then, to me, like I said, with that energy storage argument, you could say hairdryers use X amount of it. The theme for me is like, yeah, that's true, but nations have all agreed to decarbonize, so that is the end game. And when I hopefully switch my hairdryer on, we know, especially in the UK, that we've decarbonized that electricity. So again, the same with cloud storage, the overwhelming race is towards decarbonising that and making sure they're energy efficient and that they're using less. But then it's also about purpose. So if I know that the data storage is for healthcare or whatever it might be, I'm not sure you can sort of make the same argument for a coal-fired power station that's only successfully mining Bitcoin like once in every however many tries.
I think again, it's coming back to this point about balance, isn't it? We're not trying to say that blockchain is terrible technology or it's solely responsible for all the problems in the world. We're not saying that, but we're saying there are issues there and they need to be addressed, like there are issues with other things as well.
Yeah, and blockchain is I'm talking about Bitcoin, and blockchain is obviously not Bitcoin. It's two separate things. Yeah.
There is a cryptocurrency that uses solar power, and I can't for the life of me remember the name of it, but there is, and you can get solar-powered rigs.
Yeah, and I think they're now up to, it's like about 60% generally renewables powering it, but yeah, it's a way off.
We're out of time, unfortunately. Time has shown me there, so I'm going to need to wrap things up. I'm sure everybody on the panel will want to carry on this debate and these questions later, so please feel free. There are lots of other great questions here, and thank you for submitting them all. We didn't get a chance to go through all of them. There's one here I just wanted to close with, which is, what is the future for central bank digital currencies, CBDCs? There's another buzz phrase going around, and I'll take it on briefly, because my own view, and there's a lot of work going on digital currencies at the moment in ISO and ISO standards. There are no straightforward answers, is my view on this. My very personal view is that I think these types of currencies are probably more likely to be successful because it comes back to the trust and the fraud and the underpinning value in them, that they will be backed by something, whereas a lot of the currencies out there at the moment are not backed by anything, and so they can easily go to zero. and there's no comeback on anyone. You just lost your money. So I suspect that CBDCs will become more prevalent as we go forward, but it's a very emerging area, and there are lots of different views on it. So with that, thank you all for asking questions. I think in summary, very summary, we are in the very early stages of technology. There's lots of potential out there, but as we've heard by both sets of speakers, there are an awful lot of challenges, and we shouldn't shy away from those. It's going to be down to people, though, because it's not technology won't solve these things. It's down to people to solve these and to make a difference. And that probably includes most of you in this room, too. So, let's get out there and grab these opportunities. And with that, I want to thank the panel members, and I hope you'll thank them with me.
So a huge thank you again to our panel and to Giles for hosting. That was another really great session. Thank you very much. We're now moving into the community update section for a roundup of what's coming up in Cheltenham, and we're going to start off with an update from the ladies of Cheltenham Hacking Society. Just sneak that in. So after a couple of years of online events due to COVID, we're really excited to be holding our first in-person Ladies of Cheltenham Hacking Society event on Thursday, the 14th of July. Our meetups are women-centric, but not women-exclusive, so everyone is welcome to come and join us. Ooh, technical malfunction. Ladies Hacking Society events this year are based on the MITRE ATT&CK framework, and we're going to have some great local speakers, drinks, snacks, and an opportunity to get to know everyone in person. So we're really looking forward to seeing you there. You can find out more meetup information via our Ladies Hacking Society website, llhs.com/LCHS. You can follow us on Twitter at @LHS_Chelt. And you can also find us on LinkedIn. Just search for the Ladies of Cheltenham Hacking Society. Over to you, Reid.
And an update on CyNam. It's a very exciting time for us in CyNam. We have embarked on a new project with other members of our community from both the tech and the farming sectors. And we're going to be focusing on agri-tech and food security. We would absolutely welcome any input from our community. If anybody's interested in getting involved or has ideas, please get in touch. We're also excited to be hosting a second event this Thursday. 2 CyNam events in 1 week. How awesome is that? This one is going to focus on bringing together investors and founders to provide opportunities for knowledge exchange and relationship building. And if you want to find out more about that, drop us an email or talk to Rich, who's over there somewhere. Also, a call for help to our community. We want to encourage you to support local student talent as much as possible. Do you fancy inspiring 300 enthusiastic students? Is it 300, yeah? Wow. We're going to be hosting a cyber day at Bourneside School in July, and we still need more companies to support. It's a really great opportunity. Corporate social responsibility, the next generation, do get in touch with us to see how you can help and make that a reality. And finally, we've teamed up with one of our sponsors, Bamboo, to bring our community an event focusing on digital transformation. Reaching digital nirvana, is it possible? Who came up with that one? We welcome you to join us. Please do get in touch for more. Great event. Natalie.
So next to QA, QA is delighted to be the headline sponsor for this event and are excited by how Web3 will change training from traditional methods to situational environments. They are also proud to be working with All Saints and Bourneside schools to bring cyber learning into the classroom and to showcase careers in digital skills. Who knows, perhaps those students will be the next metaverse developers. For students that are very keen, QA will be running the NCSC's Cyber First Summer Programme again, which is always a popular, fun and educational event for over 1,000 14 to 17-year-olds. If you'd like more information on any of these local projects or their vacancies in learning or technical subjects, please reach out to them at QA via LinkedIn or their website qa.com. Reid.
And the Golden Valley update. I'm sure you all know we're building this incredibly large campus in the west of Cheltenham. So a lot of updates over the last sort of few months. The £23 million West Cheltenham Transport Improvement Scheme is now completed. That was part of the precursor infrastructure improvements. My wife thinks it was my fault for all the roadworks, but fortunately they've done, and they're really, really great. This funding was provided as part of the UK government's commitment to Golden Valley, and really is part of that home for the new National Cyber Innovation Centre. And you probably know that we're now part of the National Cyber Strategy, part of the Levelling Up agenda. So really, really great backing from government. And yesterday, GFirst, LEP, and the Department for International Trade launched a new Gloucestershire Cyber High Potential Opportunity. So that's really a set of assets that go around the world to all the embassies, British embassies and consulates, to show them how amazing Gloucestershire is. And that's going to bring companies and foreign direct investment here to our county. So great, a lot of people have been involved in that, and it's a really great opportunity for those of us in Gloucestershire. And great to have DIT and the LEP involved. And, of course, we wait expectantly over the next few days for the development agreement to be signed with our development partners, HBD and Factory, for Golden Valley. And that will be worth, overall, we reckon about £1 billion. So it's a massive investment, probably the biggest investment we've had in Gloucestershire. So we're really putting Gloucestershire on the map internationally, and you're all invited. Natalie.
Amazing. Now to B-Sides, which is coming to Cheltenham on July the 9th in a one-day, on a Saturday event with over 20 speakers focusing on the technical side of cybersecurity. The last and main set of tickets will go on sale this Friday at 1 p.m, so make sure you're ready to grab one of the last few.
And a Plexel update. So the NCAC for startups, the current cohort is ransomware companies in the newest intake. We're over halfway through that particular program. We have some here, including Giles, and some at the back, so please do talk to them in the crowd. And if you have any questions about what they're doing or what they're interested in, please talk to them. The team at Plexel and NCAC are planning their next intake for September. The new challenge areas are yet to be announced. I don't actually know what they're going to be about, but I'm sure it'll be great. Plexel are also hiring, so they have a range of technical and creative roles available. So check out their LinkedIn page for more details. And I think that's pretty much us.
I think it is.
So really just to finish, we want to just say some big thank yous again. Thank you to the festivals and to the tech team for hosting us. Thank you to our sponsors. And thank you to everybody who's been involved in organising, including our speakers, Natalie, and our panellists. And thank you to Nano Foundation.